So, I wanted to make a general video about buying things that last. So, it's basically one of the chapters in a theoretical book I could write about how to become, how to say you become new money, you generate some wealth, you get some income. How do you make it last and make it so that in 100 years you're old money? How do you make that transition between new money to old money? Because we've all heard or seen what happens to lottery winners or people who get short-term luck, um, and then, or say, win big at a casino. And we all have heard the stories about how it doesn't end well for them. But I think it's important to dig a little deeper and analyze what all's going on behind the scenes and with human nature and psychology that causes that. So, a lot of it has to do with financial illiteracy and how we're programmed. We're programmed to want the signs of wealth rather than wealth itself. So, like, a Rolls Royce is a sign of wealth, but it's not wealth itself because it just gets you to point B really comfortably. When you think about what that gives you compared to a Civic, like some basic car, it's not. Now there's the intangibles of how you impress people, and now of course you have to ask yourself, are you impressing the right types of people? So it has intangible values and aspects, but is it really wealth? Is it really making your life better? Is it really making your life easier? Um, what you did to get that money is, for the purposes of personal finance education, pointless. Like, whether you made that money in Google stock, being a cop, or selling illegal substances, it doesn't matter how you made the money. It's like, what are you now going to do with it now that you've gotten the money? Now, something I've learned just fundamentally, and I think I learned this from uh, Getty, which was like the world's richest man in the 70s and 60s through oil, and also YouTuber Ben Malla talks about Money 101 is buying something now that will appreciate in value and be worth more in the future. Now, there's certain things that are guaranteed to be worth less in the future than now, like things you consume. Like, so we have, like, food is really the best investment you can make because we're ultimately made up of what we eat. But once you like, once you consume it, it's arguably gone. Like unhealthy food, especially, you enjoy it. Now you have nothing to show for it after it's gone. Um, like cigarettes, drugs, um, oil and gas, energy, electricity. These things, we pay for them for a reason because they have value, but once you pay for them, that money's gone forever. Now you can make arguments like if you used that energy well, but the point still stands. Like, you burn that money and it's gone if you don't use it in a productive way. Like, if you just burn gas in your car to drive around in circles, that money's gone forever. Now, a big reason people stay in that, I think, is it's not like if you set them aside and talk to people one on one and told them like consuming things won't make you happy, most people will agree with you. But the reason they just in the day-to-day lives keep pursuing that, I think, well, deep down they're in spiritual pain and they're escaping their mind, but really they haven't wrapped their mind around the potential possibilities of buying income or buying assets. Like, most people are not trained to think that they can buy income, that they can use their money to make more money. They're not, they haven't trained their brains to work that way. And once you've trained your brain to work that way, your greed and your self-interest will almost start making you more frugal, because you're like, if I spend $100 on a fancy dinner, that's $100 that I will forever be gone from my income producing empire, which is like a money engine that, once it gets to a critical mass, is self-sustaining. Like, if you have, if you have $10 million in assets, you can figure out a lifestyle where you're passively generating way more money than you spend. And that's really the end position you want to be, but you'll never get there if you're using your money for pleasure and short-term things that just vanish. Now, I know we're not perfect, and see, this is why we're trying to get more money. This is why we're trying to get wealth and power, so that we can afford the pleasures in life. Now, the point at which we can really afford things, in my mind, is a lot. You can't afford a 50 grand car when you hit 50 grand. You can afford a 50 grand car when you hit like $1 million. See, people trap themselves because they want to be big shot. This is another Ben Mallow line. They want to be big shots before they've deserved to be a big shot. Like, if you act like a millionaire before you're a millionaire, you'll never be a millionaire. If you act like a billionaire before you're a billionaire, like, if you have 20 million and you're in this elite aristocratic, like upper class social circle, and you're trying to keep up with the appearances, and this guy's worth 200 million and you're worth 10, and you over leverage yourself to show up in some Maybach Mercedes, or I don't know how they measure their dicks in that world, but like, I'd rather be looking at a huge brokerage account on my phone that's generating income than these flashy bells and whistles that are impressing these puny mortals. That, like, this stuff won't matter in the end. Like, the people who are in power now had ancestors who hundreds of years ago were like, we don't care about short-term pleasure, we don't care about short-term fame or prestige. We're going to ensure that our descendants rule over everybody else's, because we're just going to silently be accumulating all these assets that don't, when you're walking around in everyday life, you don't have this sign above your head that says how many assets you're holding. Like, and that's what kind of bothers really shallow, stupid people, is if I win the lottery and I don't buy a fancy car, have nice clothes, how are people going to know I'm the shit? How are people going to know I'm amazing? And it's like, who cares? Like, if the roles were reversed, they would, like, game I play with myself a lot is, if the roles were reversed, how much would they care about you? Like most of the time, 99.9% of the time, you're just this NPC in this video game they're playing. And if you died, they couldn't give a shit. And you need to be honest about that. Like, so why are we wasting time, like, feeling bad about it? But so basically, buying things that last. Examples of things that last, like precious metals, gold, silver, platinum. You buy some of that, it's going to appreciate in value, probably, because inflation is built into our system. Land, artwork, even like high-end furniture, like things that could be seen as luxuries on paper and excessive, if they have the possibility of appreciating in the future, and they take minimal money to maintain, it's arguably generating wealth. It's, so training your mind to use your money to grow money. Your money are like these soldiers, these armies that you're sending out into the world to accrue more money. Um, and once you get that to a critical point, like you're making money in your sleep, you know, we're laying our head down, and I'm laying my head down at night, and Europe is waking up going to work, which I benefit from. They start, you know, they stop working. The Japanese start going to work, which I benefit from. Asia's working, and then we're working, which I benefit from. So you want to get assets where you could get sick, you could go on vacation, you could get depressed for 3 weeks and not want to get out of your bed, but you're making money in your sleep. So, like, whether you're feeling good or feeling bad, that money is just now, of course, if the worse you feel, the more likely you're going to be to spend money on bullshit to escape your pain. So that's why all this is ultimately spiritual warfare, because the better we feel, the less we're going to need to spend money on bullshit to escape ourselves. You know, so as we improve our mental health, it's easier actually to be financially healthy. You know, that's where a lot of this comes from. You always have to remind yourself that we're all constantly being sold shit by capitalists, where our ancestors lived without whatever that is. You know, like whether it's health insurance, some fancy car, some fancy house, like some fancy clothes, some technology, like a computer. Our ancestors didn't even have the option to get these things, and they were fine. And there's so much. The merchant class, as I call them, because we didn't use the word capitalist in business until the last few hundred years. It's been the merchant class, and they took the power from the church and the monarchs in secret through their financial and business acumen, and now they rule everything because around 100 years ago they were able to accrue enough wealth to buy the governments. And now the governments are just mouthpieces to placate the masses, to create an illusion of prosperity and progress, the illusion of security even, while the merchant class behind the scenes, whether they're even aware of it or not, there's a lot of rich people who are dumb and don't even know about this stuff, but they're benefiting. And they're just like, why is everyone struggling so hard? Why doesn't everyone just pull themselves up by their bootstraps? And then it's really interesting. People start claiming credit for things they don't really deserve, and they also start taking blame for things they don't really deserve blame for. There's no justice in this world, and a lot of credit doesn't matter, and it's subjective. Like, who deserves credit and who cares? Who ended up with the wealth and the power? You have enough wealth and power. It doesn't even matter what people's opinions are. Oh, that boomer thinks I'm lazy. Well, if you have $10 million, it doesn't matter what that boomer thinks. And that's just one example, So, oh, that military guy thinks I'm not patriotic. Like, the more money you have, the less you need to give a shit about their opinions, So, you want to focus on taking your money to buy things that can be theoretically sold later for a higher value. Now, I mean, sometimes the rich don't even have to sell those assets because they can use those assets as collateral, take out a loan. Like, they can just go to the bank and be like, look, can I get a loan? I'm good for it because, and I am, because if everything goes bad, I have these assets I can just sell to make good on my debt. Collateral. So there's a lot of mechanisms that make it so the rich just keep getting richer, but that's one of them. So the things that don't last, things you consume, unhealthy food, drugs, alcohol, oil, gas, electricity, these things you're going to inevitably spend some on, but just be aware that money is gone forever. You use your heater more than you need to use it. Do you really need to use that? Can you, if you just put a sweater on and a beanie, that money could instead be used to buy stocks. And if you're not yet a millionaire, that's probably what you should be doing, because if we're dependent on an employer still, we're serfs, and you need to escape serfdom. And you won't escape serfdom if you're using all your income to escape pain rather than escape slavery. Um, so you just need to be aware that, like, when you consume, that money's gone forever, and it instead could be part of your empire. So I remember hearing one time, it really clicked and affected me a lot, like 5 years ago, or I don't know when. Like, it occurred to me that a big thing that separates old money, like the new moneyed people of any era, what separates the people who transform from new money to old money and the people who just, the heirs that just blow it all, is this: they learn this way of thinking. And it's interesting is it starts as financial education, and it almost becomes spiritual, because your greed, your desire for a fortune, will make you more frugal. Because you're like, do I need this Starbucks coffee? I could buy a share in Starbucks instead of buying the coffee. Now, I'm not advocating that specific investment, but that's an example, right? Like, the coffee you'll consume now, you'll feel good for a few hours and be gone forever, and you're increasing your dependency on future consumption of that to maintain that level of pleasure and happiness. Dopamine creates these reliance cycles where, like, we all know pleasure isn't happiness, but our dopamine is giving this like budget for us to temporarily escape our minds with this pleasure. And if you overindulge, your brain will get fried and no longer be able to get pleasure from productive activities and loving activities. And I think 100 years from now, hopefully humanity's evolved where they're studying a lot more about neuroscience and brain chemistry, because it, even though this is a financial channel, it veers into the spiritual and the philosophical, because you start to ask yourself, do I need to consume? Like, and this consumption is limiting my freedom. And you start to realize that consumerism is a big part of what enslaves the masses. Because you may look good leasing that BMW while renting an apartment. You look good when you're out and about in the world. You look like you're a successful, productive member of society, and you're mating material because you have done things right. Have you, though? Have you done things right? So you have to be careful who you're impressing, where you're actually getting. It's like you're spinning your wheels to make a car payment and pay off the mortgage of your landlord for appearances and feelings. And that's how slaves are made. Like, you get hundreds of millions, billions of people just thinking about the day-to-day pleasures, but that currency is going into the hands of the powerful. And they get that money, and then they're using that money to make more money, and then they're using that money to make more money, and meanwhile they're just laughing at all of us. Well, not like, some of them are more or less aware of the mechanics behind what they're doing. Like, I actually think one of the reasons we get so wealthy is because we're consciously aware of the engine that's at play. Like, so many of the rich are benefiting from these mechanisms that they don't even understand. But if you're able to understand it and conceptually and visualize what's going on, and kind of like imagine this money flowing around in this figurative, like this invisible stream of energy. Like, the money of the world is kind of like how in the movie Matrix, how they converted people into battery sources. That's what currency does. Is currency allows the energy of the masses to be harnessed and you can make an engine out of that energy. And I don't think even the rich are conceptualizing and visualizing really what's going on. It takes some emotional fortitude too, because you see things like this and you have to be conscientious. Your conscience has to be okay with subjugating people, taking advantage of people. Uh, I was blessed with a conscience that I've always been pretty ruthless. Like, give me a reason to care about you and I'll care about you, but the rest of the people, like, how can they serve me, you know? So I have the tribe I care about, and then everyone else is going to serve my tribe. So, I mean, so anyway, I just wanted that food for thought out there, you know. Buy things that last, because otherwise, like, you worked hard for that money, you slaved away for that money. Have something to show for it, and have the fortitude to not lose all of it because you need to escape yourself by pursuing these pleasures and caring about other people's opinions of you. Um, just you reel that in and focus on what is going to last and what will your descendants benefit from. Um, and then realize that, like, ultimately, these sacrifices that the 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 sacrifices that financial education teaches you to make is good for your mental health. It's good for the planet. Um, so, not that we give a shit about that, but it just ends up working. Like my desire to amass a fortune made it so I drove an old ass Honda Civic for decades, and that's better for the environment than buying a brand new Tesla and putting that battery in the ground when you're sick of your status symbol. You know, like, conserving things for a long time is better for the environment than buying an electric vehicle. Like that's a whole nother topic. But um, yeah, tell me what you guys think. Hope you guys liked it. Buy things that last.